Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching or logging on from in the world, and welcome to this special Infrastructure Intelligence event today, organised in association with Atkins. And this is the big contracts debate. We've teamed up with Atkins to organise this special debate on what we think is a key issue facing the industry. And that key issue is the contracting models that are being used currently and whether they need to change to facilitate the industry's digital transformation. We've got an excellent lineup for you today to debate this important question. And we also have I almost called her a celebrity chair, but that would be wrong. We have a special guest chair for today, so I can actually take a bit of a rest this morning and twiddle some knobs in the background, as they say. But that guest chair is Lisa Kelvey, who is the major projects delivery partner at KPMG, and she'll be your chair for today. We have two teams who are going to debate this key question of, is construction's digital transformation dependent on the introduction of new contracting models? We have a yes team who believe that there does need to be some change, and that is Richard Robinson, the CEO of Atkins UK and Europe, and Dev Amratia, who is the CEO and co-founder of nPlan. They're going to be on the yes team, and they're going to be speaking to to that question. Opposing that concept is our no team, who don't believe that construction's digital transformation is dependent on the introduction of new contracting models. And the no team, we have Keith Waller, Programme Director for the Construction Innovation Hub, and also Martin Perks, who's the Commercial Programme Director for Highways England. And I know that we're expecting a lively debate amongst all of our participants, who I know are raring to go, having spoken to them just before we started the event. As always, we like a bit of interaction at these events. So if you're in the audience, and we know there's quite a lot of you, then please post any questions or observations in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we possibly can. Obviously, that will depend on time, because we do have an hour for this event. So after our two teams have outlined their positions, there will be a proper debate and discussion around the question under discusussion. And then at the end, we'll have a poll, so you, the audience, can actually take part yourself and let us know what you think, whether or not you've even been swayed by the insights and discussion that we're going to have during the course of the next hour. So that's enough. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand over now to our chair for today, who is Lisa Kelvey, who is as I said, the partner for major projects delivery at KPMG. Lisa, the floor and the event is yours.
Thank you very much, Andy. And good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's listening. So the last year has been a really challenging one for the whole country and the construction industry as well. And I think we've really shown that we can adapt, and we can adapt quickly when we need to. But historically, our track record on embedding change really isn't so great. Construction productivity has lagged substantially behind other sectors, and we've been really slow to adopt digital technology. We've been talking about digital at events like this for a long time, and it's always felt that the transformation was just over the horizon and it was coming, but wasn't quite here yet. And I think that's shown through the Global Construction Survey that we conduct at KPMG every couple of years. In 2017, just 5% of organisations saw themselves as leaders in digital innovation, and the vast majority were really just waiting to see what others did. In 2019, this had moved up quite a bit, 20% now wanting to be leaders, and the others had upped their investment as well. We're just finishing our 2021 survey, and we've seen it shift forward substantially again. I think now we really are at a tipping point for digital transformation. And in the UK, it's really time to make digital the backbone of our approach to construction. The government set out very ambitious plans to build back better and greener and level up across the UK. A key part of this strategy is unprecedented levels of investment in infrastructure, with 600 billion of public sector investment over the next 5 years. But more of the same just isn't good enough. Infrastructure needs to be delivered faster and for less, at the same time as delivering, reducing carbon and improving resilience. So we need to see this investment not just as a catalyst for change across our society, but a catalyst for change in our industry. And the construction playbook makes that really clear. We need to grab the opportunity to push forward and embracing digital as a key to improving our productivity. One of the reasons that's really often quoted for the slow adoption of digital is our contracting models, the way we allocate risk, the way we incentivise performance, and the low margins in our industry. So are these contracting models really outdated and a barrier to collaboration and innovation? Or is it just the way we use them, the behaviours and the ways of working and the culture that we need to change? This debate is really timely and one that many of my clients are grappling with as they push forward in their digitalisation plans. We've got a fantastic panel. They've got some very interesting point of views, and I think we're going to have some good banter as well. So let's get started. I'm going to come to you first, Richard. Is construction's digital transformation dependent on the introduction of new contracting models?
Lisa, thank you. Good morning. Thanks for that fantastic intro to the session, and Andy as well. And good morning, everybody out there. It's really great to be here with such an interesting set of debatees, I think is possibly the phrase. So look, in short, it's a resounding yes from me, unsurprisingly, been on the yes team. And I'll set out my position in 3 key strategic areas. Firstly, point number 1, history, which I think you referred to a little bit there, Lisa. Several well-respected studies have shown productivity in our industry has flatlined for over 25 years, when in the wider economy, an improvement of 30% has been achieved. And specifically in terms of digital transformation, another study in 2017 ranked construction only above hunting and fishing in terms of the degree of digital transformation of our industry. That survey actually has been repeated again recently, and I do believe we've dropped behind even that competitor. It just does not seem credible, does it, that a carry on doing what we are doing approach makes any sense and will result in change or improvement. That's point number 1. Point number 2, a shift to contracting on value has to happen. Why? Well, name me a single technology company that has transformed its industry that operates at 3 to 5% margin. Just name me one. Google, for example, operates 20 to 30% margin. And why is that important? It's important because they capture the value they create and they're able to reinvest heavily in research and development. And I think concerns in public sector in terms of perception of cap on margins due to value for money, managing public money really drives a lot of that. This has to change. Unless innovators can capture value created, why would we create the value? My third point, digital and data is changing the game at the traditional project boundaries, and contracting approaches are simply not keeping up with this. Confusion and fear by all parties regarding the need to retain IP continues to fragment the industry and hamper value creation by the industry as a whole. Contracts don't support interoperability across traditional boundaries and are starting to place totally unreasonable demands, for example, regarding data accuracy on consultants and contractors. We have seen direct examples of clients relying on this to reject compensation events, for example, which seems totally unfair. A second example, we've also seen contract provisions actually make design, reuse and automation impossible. And that's one of the key tenets of or one of the main things in the construction playbook, to use those things to drive efficiency. Why do public sector clients want to own IPR? It seems totally inverted. And do they even want to own it, or is it the contract at work? So to sum up, why would we expect anything to change? We've tried no change for 30 plus years. Contracts that prevent value capture by the innovator, technology leader, stifles investment. And many examples right now, many live examples of where traditional contracts are just not working with digital exist. So there's my position, Lisa, and hope that makes sense. And I'll hand to Dev, I think, to conclude our side of the argument.
Thank you, Richard. And I have only words that are going to strengthen Richard's argument even further into the yes camp. I start my argument. I have three main points to argue as well. Building on Richard's point about history, we have three reports: the Lantham report in 1994, the Egan report in 2001, the Farmer report in 2016. There is a 12-year gap between those reports, and the last report was issued 5 years ago. And so 12 plus 5 is enough years that we can count as stability. All three reports say one thing: we need to collaborate more to get to better outcomes. Now, one must wonder, how can you get 12 years down the line, plus 5, I would say, till today, and still be in the same position? So we're not getting better. And that's it. That's why we need to change. It's a fairly obvious argument in that perspective. But maybe if I turn the lens towards my second point, which is around opportunity, which is a far more positive spin to take than to say that, well, nothing's improved, so therefore we must change. So the second reason why we must see this change is quite simply, there's a tremendous opportunity to change, meaning we can actually capture value and deliver better outcomes into this industry. To explain this better, I want to just pick apart one word, which is the contract. So what is a contract? A contract, quite simply said, is a mechanism to transfer risk. To transfer risk, you have to know what risk exists. You have to be able to quantify it. You have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to understand it. If you can't do any of those things, you're not transferring anything. So a contract is therefore a useless form of collaboration, if you want to put it that. And therefore, the opportunity comes from the fact that we now have technology available at our fingertips. There's no more R&D required. It's not like we have to go invent this stuff now. We have it. It's here. It's available in the marketplace. I run a company that develops some of this stuff. And the opportunity is that this technology creates the mechanism to quantify, understand, and make visible the risk that is present inside these projects. Using that, effectively, you're able to now distribute that risk fairly between two parties. And you're able to collaborate, right? Back to what Lantham said in 1994, we can make his wish come true and give them collaboration through contracting mechanisms that allows the opportunity of technology to come forth. I'll leave my argument there for now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dev. So we're now going to move over to our second team, and Keith Waller, who's going to say why he thinks that transformation really is not dependent on new contracting models.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to make the case for no. And as I've only got 3 minutes, I'd like to use an analogy. Let us consider, instead of construction contracts, cars. Like contracts, they operate as part of a complex, interdependent system. So imagine a scenario where a car driver has crashed their car 10 times in the last year. Why? Because they aren't properly trained to drive it. They don't understand how to maintain it safely, have no awareness of other road users, and make no adjustments to the weather conditions. And then they go for a drive. And guess what? They crash it for the 11th time. So is the answer, buy another car? Because clearly it's not them that's the problem. So if you look at DFT's analysis behind the 228,000 road traffic accidents each year, you'll find around 20% were caused by conditions or other external factors. Over 75% were the fault of the driver. But less than 1% were down to the vehicle. Less than 1%. So instead, why don't we make sure drivers are properly qualified? They know how to maintain their vehicles in good working order and understand the needs of other users in this complex, interconnected system. Let me be clear. I do accept there are times when you might want to modify your car for certain conditions, a roof rack for extra luggage. But that is not a new car. That is an experienced driver adapting to the conditions. Now, you'll find no one more passionate than me about the need for digital transformation in our sector. It's literally my day job. and the clear benefits this transformation will bring to citizens, to businesses, and to society at large. We all need it. So before we rush to blame the contracts, let's take a long, hard look at ourselves, the drivers of these current contracts. Current contracts don't prevent digital transformation. No one really believes that. But how we operate them is a barrier. And there may be times in the future when a new contract will help, but we are not dependent on it for digital transformation. What we are absolutely dependent on is being able to operate our contracts properly. So let me conclude by saying digital transformation for our sector is welcome, overdue, and necessary. But for it to happen, we need the right capability, the right behaviours to operate our current contracts. It's your skills, capabilities, and behaviours that we are really dependent on. So ask yourself this: if a loved family member kept crashing their old hatchback, would you invest in a new Aston Martin for them? Or would you face the truth and realise they need help to improve their capabilities and behaviours, not just a shiny new car? Don't let the fact that 1% of road accidents are caused by a fault with the vehicle blind you to the clear truth that 99% have nothing to do with the car and much more to do with who was driving it and how it was driven. I move for no, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Keith. And then we're going to move on to Martin, who's going to continue to support that argument.
Hello and good morning, everybody. I'm supporting the motion for no in this debate, entirely focused around that word dependent. My argument supports Keith's analogy and builds on it. Contracts assemble the agreement between parties, how they intend to behave. They describe outcomes, and in construction, the forms of contract, and especially those that already enable digitization, are entered into knowingly right now. When you buy a car, you never really intend to crash it, as Keith identified. All modern contracts recognize the need for digital systems and software, as well as the management and ownership of data. Contracts that exist to support closer working and use digitalization are with us right now. They're simply not being effectively used, or in the car analogy, driven, because our corporate and behavioral maturity is stuck in paper-based manual as default statuses. I go to Dev's recommendation about Latham. That generated NEC. NEC is here now. It's been here for the last 20 years. Let's get to use it really properly. How many construction contracts are absolutely bespoke? Not many. So in the analogy, there aren't many self-assembled kit cards on our roads. There are, however, a great many modifications to the standard models out there, done with the assurance of our favourite mechanic or lawyer, that they better represent you as the owner of the contract. With the current rise in partnering and alliancing and integration, the real dependency is on integrated project teams' behaviour. Exactly the same thing as Keith's saying. I believe the existing standard forms of contract facilitate, amongst other things, digitalisation and use of real-time data. They're designed for delivering increased productivity based on digital media. So digitalisation is not dependent on new forms of contract, they exist. The dependency, as Keith alluded to, is, however, how we work with these forms of contract. It's behavioural, and behaviours are down to how companies and individuals and the tribes within our community that we all belong to unintentionally constrain us from acting and working in unison. The dependency is the choices we make and what influences those choices. Just like the driver, too fast, too slow, too little attention to the environment, too distracted, too inconsiderate of other people. They're all choices. For me, this is the construction sector's elephant in the room. We believe the mechanics and go ahead and modify the car, or we buy a new car. The modification is to accommodate our bad behaviour. Auto braking, lane drift notification, vehicle spacing indicators, and think it will stop us crashing the next time. Wrong. We need to better equip drivers for vehicles and contracts and conditions. So let's focus on better scoping, handover briefings, induction, training, collaborative planning to understand the vehicle or the contract we're in. Let's make sure that we know where the journey is going to take us. Let's make sure that all the people that are joining us on the journey are going to the same place. And the travellers are in the same direction, and that we're going on the same timeline and we all understand the same price. In concluding the case for no, we'd suggest that with the existing plethora of contracts out there, most which enable and encourage digital delivery, complicating the landscape with another form of contract may actually cause more crashes. In simple terms, dependency is related to behaviour of people from top to bottom of the industry, not the form of contract. So, is digitalisation dependent on a new form of contract? From Keith and I, it's a no.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to everyone there, and some really good thought-provoking arguments. So we're going to start off with a few questions from me, and then we'll move into questions from the audience. And I can see there's some great questions coming through there already. So if anyone else has got a question, please do share them in the chat. So I'm going to start off with a question about cultural and behavioural change. I think you've all mentioned that in your speech. And I'm going to start with Keith and ask you, given that size and scale of the behavioural change and the ways in which behaviours have been embedded into the way that we work with our contracts, can we really make that change without rethinking our contracts and coming at it from a different perspective?
Absolutely, and I think actually one of the areas, Lisa, that I think we've got to recognise, and Richard alluded to it in what he was saying, is we are actually seeing a different policy environment, a different demands from society, from our investment in construction and infrastructure. People are now more focused on delivering social value, supporting a path to net zero, considering the whole life performance. So the way that clients are articulating their requirements, responding to those demands, is really sending a much clearer signal to industry about the ambitions we're seeking. So rather than a tactical contract that's focused purely on cost minimization and unnecessary risk transfer, we're seeing a much broader ambition that is enabled by our current contracts. The barrier to me is actually, we really have to think about our own behaviours and our own capability. There's some really, I've been looking through the list of people on this call. There's some really clever, really innovative people on this call. If we can help work with our current framework and enhance and build on the behaviours and capabilities that people have, our current contracts allow us to do it. We are already seeing current contracts driving digitisation because they've got the right behaviours. Now, I said in my note, in one of my remarks, I'm not saying a new contract wouldn't help, but we have to get the right behaviours, the right capability, the right skills, the right collaboration in there for it to work. If you can't drive an old jalopy, you can't drive a Formula One car. A Formula One car may help you, but only if you've got the right capability and the understanding of that environment. So to me, the dependency, and this is the topic of the debate, not would it help, it's is it dependent? What we are dependent on are people's skills and behaviours, their ability to collaborate, their ability to align and see that big picture. A contract may help, but we are dependent on the behaviours and the capabilities in that space.
Lovely, thanks, Keith. So, Richard, I'm sure you've got a response to that. What do you think?
Well, I'm trying not to sound flippant with it, but Keith, what car do you drive?
I drive a Mercedes car.
You don't drive a Ford Model T, then?
No, I don't. Exactly.
So the evolution and the fixing of the parts that didn't work that's happened for the last 60 or 70 years is presumably important to you. And so I think, I think that brings the point to life, doesn't it? It's certain components that are fundamentally broken that are going to prevent us accelerating digital transformation even further. I think
the Model T got you from A to B. I think that the challenge you've got to face is, if we don't have the right capabilities, if we can't drive, if we don't understand what's happening around us, we take no notice of other people and the circumstances, it doesn't matter what you're driving, you're going to crash. Dependent, a Model T would get me there. I'm not dependent on a Mercedes to get me from A to B. I'm dependent on my ability to drive it. That's what I'm dependent on. It's not, the debate isn't about would it help. I agree it would help. My argument is it is not dependent on it. It's dependent on people's behaviours and capabilities.
Lisa, can I just build on that? One of the things that I think is really interesting around the behaviours point is we all know, don't we, that an integrated project team relies on having a single source of data truth. However, our behaviour causes us to have multiple sets of data truth. And so that's nothing to do with the contract. It's to do with our behaviour, whether we all believe one single source of the truth, that is the data that's contained within any digitalization model around a project or not. The contract doesn't say you can't look at other people's inputs into a data model. It's our behavior that's restricting that. And it's the single biggest constraint in what we're doing around digitization is we all want our own version of it.
Can I build on this point about behavior? Because I wholeheartedly agree with the opposing team's perspective on behavior matters. But our argument is that the behavior is driven by the contract. Your behaviors, the way two parties act on the project is generally driven by commercial gain, right? We live in a capitalist society. And so when you're trying to work towards a commercial gain and the mechanism you will use to work to that commercial gain, and therefore the behaviors you will exhibit on your project are driven by the contract, you have a flaw in the system. So in that example where you talk about a project where there's an integrated project delivery team and they're seeking this common source of the truth through data, which is a wonderful use of technology. If the two parties can't come together using a mechanism that is simple and understandable, that both parties get to an equitable outcome, surely the thing that's in the middle of all of that is the contract.
That's right, but
the behaviors are flawed because of the contract.
I think that's probably, if you look at the actual evidence from, let's take Arcadis's Global Contracts Dispute Report that came out. So they produce one every year. And if you look at the cause of contractual disputes, very much like the road traffic accidents, over 75%, I said, are caused by the driver. If you look at this report, over 75% are caused by the behaviours of people. If you look at the causes of contractual disputes, there is nothing in there in the top 5 that is the contract. It's how people administer it, and it's how people behave on it. So actually not every contract ends in a dispute. Some go incredibly well, using exactly the same form of contract. So surely that's down to the behaviours, the way it's administered, and people's understanding of it, not the form of contract itself. If the contract was the thing that was at fault, not the people operating it, every contract would fail, and it doesn't. So you look at the actual evidence that says the majority are caused by people's behaviour and understanding in contractual disputes. So therefore, that's not saying the contract's at fault, it's how people are using it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't improve contracts. It does not mean that contracts couldn't be better. But even if they are improved, even they do unlock all these things that you've been talking about, without the right behaviours, without the right capabilities, then we will not get that digital transformation we all agree is really important and really essential. We all want the same thing. My argument, I think, differs because I think we need to focus much more on building capability and improving people's behaviours to operate the system, our complex interdependent system, much better. The opportunities are there. We have the capability. We just need to build it and get the right behaviours so we get that digital transformation we all want and we all need.
So I think there's some strong arguments there on both sides. Let's move on a little bit and explore value. Richard, you talked about value quite a lot in your opening argument. Really, we need to move from output-focused contracts into outcome-focused contracts. That's a key part of unlocking value. Can we do that with the contracts that we've got? Richard, do you want to go first?
Well, it doesn't seem that we are doing now, does it? And I'll put an example out there for you to use. So for us to kind of debate around, I guess. So if somebody had come to the Crossrail team, say in 2014 or 15, and said, I can absolutely assure your schedule and all your systems integration, but I want £300 million, and 90% of that is margin that goes to my bottom line. There is no way in a million years that contract, that that would have been taken up as an option. Yet it would have saved X million pounds, years of commuter disruption, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, in terms of value capture, I just can't see how it happens in the current environment, and I give that as a hypothetical example.
I'll give an opposite example, Rich. You'll be shocked to hear is that actually, if you look at some of the long-term frameworks that exist in our regulated utilities, let's take the water sector as an example. Those contracts are now much more focused on delivering customer outcomes. They're focused on delivering reduction in waste, improved customer satisfaction. And that knowledge and the behaviours that work in those integrated teams, using current forms of contract, have actually driven the focus on outcomes that Lisa mentioned. So actually, it's, you know, I absolutely take your point, Richard, that many contracts, the way they're administered, the way they're used, do not support the delivery of value. But actually, that is the way that clients are setting out their requirements and the choice of the right delivery model and commercial strategy, not the form of contract itself. So there are forms of contract being used today on major infrastructure projects across the United Kingdom that are driving those long-term outcomes, not a narrow measure of cost and time, but focusing on that quality, that delivery of customer satisfaction, the end user benefits, those wider outcomes that we seek from the investment in infrastructure. So the way those contracts are being administered and set up, the choice of the delivery model, the choice of the commercial strategy, the behaviours of the partners are what are delivering that value. We just don't see enough of it. There is a real poor record in the UK, in public sector and private sector, of choosing the wrong form of contract, having the wrong behaviours in there, setting out the requirements with a narrow focus on capital delivery and risk transfer, rather than using what the contract can do and what things like the Green Book can do to support the delivery of broader social, economic and environmental outcomes. And that's the focus we need to move away from a narrow focus on cost minimisation and risk transfer to the delivery of that value and the supporting those broader long-term social, economic and environmental outcomes that we all want from the investment we make.
And Keith, I didn't get a chance to sort of say in the first section, I have a lot of actual agreement and respect for the points you made around the current behaviours around contracts and how some go well and some don't, and it's often around behaviours, but that's contracts here and now. And I think I can see, I think Dev can see, and he'll use some examples no doubt, that of where digital transformation is driving a new set of problems for the current contracts we've got, specifically the flow of data across those project boundaries, the flow of IP between project boundaries, and how that fundamentally needs to change if we're going to apply machine learning, artificial intelligence, and get the size of data sets and consistency and quality of data sets that are not, the risk of which is not hung on any particular party. And those are the sort of things that certainly I've started to see coming through where I can't see how the current contracts can handle that. That's the bit that I struggle with.
So I think that's a really good point, and that probably brings us on to our next question, and I'll perhaps go to Dev for this one to kick us off. So the construction contracts generally are quite long duration. Digital is changing fairly rapidly. Are our existing contracts just too inflexible to support that transformation at the pace that we need it?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think I saw in the chat from Will Squires, I believe, that talked about the temporal nature and Moore's law, which is a fantastic thing to cite. Moore's law is around the pace at which technology is evolving. The rigidity of the contracts is definitely something that it could hamper an accelerated environment for technology. We see this, where significant projects, mega projects in the UK and abroad, these are 10-year schemes that they have to today specify what sort of BIM system they're going to have and what sort of information systems they're going to have during the operations phase of a project 30 years in the future. That's a really difficult / impossible thing to state into a contract. So my argument is that the contracts that we see today are generally too prescriptive, too rigid, and do not enable a truly collaborative environment that technology can flourish in. There are plenty of opportunities and examples that Keith and Martin will know about where they have got pockets of good behavior. But if you look forward and the pace at which technology changes, the pace at which infrastructure projects, there's a disconnect there. And we have to move into a more agile position.
Great, thanks, Dev. So Martin, I'm sure you want to respond to that. Do you think that our current contracts are too inflexible, or can they flex to enable the transformation?
I'm in a space where some contracts that sourced themselves a long time ago without the foresight of where we would get to now in digitalization are more difficult to manage digital data and data ownership and all the things that Richard's just talked about. But I think the contracts that are in action now that are more recently developed are suitably designed to enable that. And I think neither Keith or I are arguing that the evolution of contracts won't make things easier. They will take on board the things that develop as we go through. But just like Richard's argument around the Model T to a Mercedes, it's still a car, it's still got four wheels, it's still got a driver and four seats, it still gets you from A to B. And it's not about whether the car has evolved, it's about whether you can use it. What's the behavior? This thing within this debate is digitalization dependent? And I absolutely agree that it is made easier. The flex of contracts and the agility of people enable more outcome from the same thing, but it's not dependent upon new contracts. So there's my case is it'll make it easier. It's not dependent, and it comes back to this word around dependency. So yeah, great. We can go faster. We can be more comfortable. We can have air conditioning. You know, all of those things around the analogy, but that doesn't make you less likely to crash.
And I think this, if the debate, Lisa, was entitled, you know, would new forms of contract that supported digital transformation backed by a program of building people's capabilities and behaviours be a good thing, you'll have four people arguing yes.
Correct.
I think the question is getting that sequence right. Richard's absolutely right. Contracts have evolved over time, you know, to respond to needs. What often has lagged behind is people's capability and people's behaviours to do that. And the more we start moving to digital transformation, smarter ways of working, thinking about whole life outcomes rather than just the capital phase, we need to make sure that people's behaviours and capabilities, their ability to work together, is in advance of getting a form of contract that supports it. The form of contract should support the capability and behaviour, not drive people to change. And I think we're just a case of getting the sequence right. And the fact that we're already seeing some contracts being delivered now that are really supporting proper digital transformation using current forms leads me to believe we're not dependent on it. The fact it's not been happening everywhere, you know, means that we need to do more to build capability. And I absolutely agree with both you, Dev and Richard. We need new forms of contract to support ways of working, but digital transformation is not dependent on it. We are dependent on capabilities and behaviours first and foremost. Contracts will follow in that space.
Lisa, I'd probably like to just ask Keith and Martin a sort of question on the value front, or just to maybe expand the debate on that, because I do, and value capture, because I do really believe, as I said in my opener, believe it or not, I believe what I said in my opener, which was if the examples of technology companies who've driven huge change, they capture the margin, they can reinvest, and we just don't see that. There is not one example in our industry of that, I don't think, and I just wanted to really get your thoughts on whether you think that's important, that some winners in digital transformation are able to capture more of the margin, or whether it's more of a team game, I guess would be. Sorry.
Yeah. So Richard, can I give you an example? So I am likely to go to what Highways England are doing, but we've put in place a regional delivery partnership which absolutely does that. It's based on target value delivery, so it looks at the value that is derived for the end user, but it also creates a budget incentivization model that allows the delivery partner to retain all of the value of their investment in digitalization, in behavioral change, in in efficient design, in repetitious design, in recycling of lean activity, and the continual improvement of methodology and delivery activity. So, and that's a model that's based around NEC4. So you don't need a new NEC or a new version of NEC to do it. You need a delivery model that recognizes that you need to align reward and risk. You need to align everybody's intention on the outcome. You need to focus people on predictability. You as a supplier need predictability for your business. I as a client need predictability for my business. And yet we've got thousands of people in our industry who are juxtapositioning whether I can do something that's unpredictable this month. I get suppliers coming back to me and saying, why are you penalizing me for not being predictable? I've just pulled a rabbit out of a hat and saved you a load of money. It's like, great, you saved me a load of money, but why didn't you tell me you were going to do it before you expected me to move to a point where I was paying X and now I'm paying X minus 2. I'd really like to know that I was only going to do X minus 2 before we started the process. Everybody would have been safer. Everybody would have been more aligned. We wouldn't have wasted time, effort, and skill and talent in the process. So I think there are models. The construction playbook builds on all those things and is encouraging people to move to that thing. The value-based toolkit that's come out that says, okay, look at what the value is you want out of a contract before you start aligning everybody to the end game. And that's what in my analogy of making sure you know where you're going and all your passengers know where that they're going to the same place and everybody's on the same timeline and everybody's on the same price. That analogy is, stick people in a car. It's great if you pick up a hitchhiker, but if they're not going in the same direction as you, then you're not going to have a happy journey.
So Richard, you raised a really good point about making sure we drive value. And if we are demonstrating as a supply chain that we're driving value, that should attract higher margins. And I think some of the things we're seeing from the direction of travel with government and their procurement reforms and their increasing focus and sometimes mandate on whole life performance and whole life value rather than this constrained capital cost is really important. And that's why, through the hub, we've developed the value toolkit. And I'm looking at the clock. In 16 minutes time, the ability to register to be an early adopter on that ends. We asked 30 people and hoping to get 20 people, 20 organizations to sign up. We're 125 as of yesterday. So there's a lot of people seeing the benefit in trying to shape that value-based decision. They see it's something that drives greater value to their businesses as suppliers. Clients are seeing it as something that helps deliver their strategic corporate objectives, supports those broader policy objectives. And we do expect through the delivery models and the commercial strategies, and therefore the forms of contract that come out of that, we will be attracting and enabling the industry to innovate, thrive and grow and be more profitable, because people aren't going to invest in developing new tools, new products, new solutions, new ways of delivering value for margin if they've got no margin and no cash in the bank. So it's really important we do that. And I do think what we will see, as Dev's point about the importance of data and the value of data, if you look at the top 20 contractors or consultants over the last 50 years, they've more or less stayed the same. There's been a few mergers every now and again, one goes pop, but people generally move up a couple of places or down a couple of places. That will change. I think we're going to see disruptors coming in, people who recognize the value of data, people who are driving new products and solutions coming in. And they'll do that because they see value to their businesses and their shareholders and their investors in doing that. They believe that there's a real lot of value we can unlock. We can deliver far better performance, far better outcomes, from our investment. And I think getting the right behaviors, getting the right capability to take advantage of that and encouraging people, really important. And I really am quite optimistic we'll see that digital transformation and we'll see that greater value coming out of how the industry works in the future. And data and digital transformation, absolutely key enablers of that.
So I think there's some strong points there. And I'm going to move on to some of the points from the audience now. So there's a great question here, I think, from Miranda Sharp that builds on what you were just saying, Keith, and asks, really, can we have a new attitude to the means of valuing and transacting for data assets without new contracts? Because our contracts were designed for steel and cement. So perhaps I'll come in and get Dev's view on that first, and then we'll let Martin and Keith respond.
Yeah, well, my argument will continue in the same camp, of course. Maybe to answer the question, I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction with giving you a specific example on just how prohibitive digital transformation can be. And I want to underline the word transformation, not digital incremental improvements. Under the banner of transformation, I have a specific example where I can point to, and I will not name the project for obvious reasons, where a project that has a target cost model and alliance style contracting, you know, the good type of contract, I suppose, or the better type of contract as the other team might think, is completely hamstrung to utilize specifically its nPlan's technology, which is a technology that can help using data forecast the project for the contractor and the client. Now, why did that project not take up the use of such a service? It's in many parts, one would consider a no-brainer. You're going to use lots and lots of data to tell you what might happen to your project. Surely that's going to help the project. The reason that it could not go ahead was quite simply, they had struck a contract that already set a false target cost, or you know, a target cost that was incorrect, I would say, and maybe not false. And there was complete rigidity to change that. It would have required all the stakeholders to come back onto the project. It could have actually jeopardized the project's economics in a sanctioning project. What my argument here is that the form of contract that is being used is not, and it just is completely rigid to allow that transformation journey to begin. The transformation, to be clear about why this is not incremental, it's a whole new way of being able to manage risk on a contract, right? If you're not using Bob's opinion and Jane's opinion, and you're instead using a machine learning system to help guide decisions on a project, that's not incremental change. That's a monumental shift. But the contract will say, no, you can't do that because you need to appoint Bob and Jane to do a job, and Bob and Jane will do their job and set you up for quote unquote success.
Okay, great. So Martin, do you want to give a different perspective on that?
Thank you. Yeah. So so my experience of engaging in a space like that, Dev, is that setting up a target cost is exactly that, setting up a target cost. The ambition is that you outperform it and that you use all the means that are at your disposal to outperform it. I think that the forms of contract don't, in my experience, don't preclude you from doing that. It's the interpretation of what you're undertaking that constrains you, and this gets back to this idea that that it's about choices. So the choice to interpret it in one way, or the choice to interpret it another, and the choice to interpret it in a way that allows you to do these things is just that. It's a choice. And I think that the parties to contracts, yes, absolutely need to be alive to that. And as we're in a space at the moment where the information that you're talking about, the common data that it can be fed into machine learning capability, as long as both parties are comfortable with the mechanics that are being put in place to allow that machine learning to happen. In my experience, that's not a space that is constrained by the contract. I respect that you are having a different experience to that, but certainly the contracts, and especially the alliance contracts that we're putting in place, we're absolutely not only encouraging and creating the agility and the flexibility to allow that machine learning, that digitalization to happen. We're wholeheartedly participating in the process, because it's a definite advantage to us to take out the subjectivity that occurs with human involvement. So we want to be able to redeploy human interpretation of and the intuition that we all have of being able to look more predictively at outcomes and data based on the experiences that we've had previously, but to use that machine learnt data to be able to help us do that. Hope that came across okay.
So, I mean, I support, I think Dev's got a really strong point here around, the need for us to have transformation in the sector. Absolutely essential. We are going to be investing, as you said at the start, Lisa, hundreds of billions of pounds in our economic and social infrastructure. We need to make sure, recognising the state of the public finances, we're getting really good value for money. We're really supporting the needs of citizens and society. But quite often when we try and fix a problem, we start at the wrong point, which is often too late. Many of the previous reports trying to fix construction started at the start of a project, which is way too late. And procurement itself is way too late. If we want to drive that transformation, there's a number of precursor steps that we need to unlock. So we really need to understand, what are the real value drivers, what's important, a race to net zero, supporting levelling up, driving social impact, delivering better services for users and citizens. And then we need to understand, the capabilities that exist in the client organisation and then the market. They will vary on different projects in different spaces. We need to understand the appetite for risk. We need to then, based on those value drivers and those capabilities and those appetite, choose the right delivery model and commercial strategy that will best deliver that transformed performance, that value. Then we start to move into procurement and picking the contracting model. If we start procurement before we've decided those things, if we pick a form of contract before we do these things, we've locked in failure, we've locked in the ability, an inability to transform the sector. So really Richard's point about how do we actually really understand and drive value that supports the transformation of our sector, that creates better outcomes from the investment, that drives businesses to thrive, to innovate, to be more profitable, to grow in that space. We really need to be looking at those behaviours, that understanding before we move into procurement, before we move into contracts, because that's how we're going to unlock the latent value, the latent potential that sits in our sector.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on a little bit. I'm sure we'll come back to you in a minute, Martin, but I'm going to move on a little bit because we've got loads of great questions here, and sadly we're not going to get through them all. So I've got one here from Alex Cudliffe, which says there's not currently a single contract which realises the construction playbook's intent. You can do it with our current contracts, but they all require significant bespoking, and that undermines the opportunities for repetition and efficiencies through having norms across the construction industry. Do we really want a plethora of different solutions for each contract that tries to solve some of these problems? Or as an industry, would we thrive much better if we had a new form of standardised contract that builds these constraints in from the start? So perhaps come to you first on that one, Richard.
Agreed. I think I'd say no. I'd read Alex's comment, great comment, and I was actually going to pose that as a question too, because I think it's because I think you could I suppose look at the current set of contracts and say, well, you can legally engineer whatever you want within them with all sorts of clauses and Z clauses and all the rest of it and appendices. But really, I think Alex makes a great point. There's not a single contract form which realises the construction playbook's intent, and they all require significant amendment. And we all know where that leads with unlimited liability and everything else gets thrown in there. And we have to argue our way all the way back up the hill to get the things taken out, which is just an enormous waste of everyone's time and effort and money. So I haven't got a lot other to say than I agree with it.
So Martin, you might have a different perspective on that. Do you want to give your view?
I think no, I haven't got a different perspective. I think the construction playbook articulates a lot of things that are beneficial. Simplifying construction contracts so that they pick up the things that the construction playbook has as an ambition, is absolutely something that I think everybody would welcome. One of the things we did with both with regional delivery partnerships was to try and stick to the standard form of contract as closely as we possibly could and limit the number of Z clauses down to under 20. And it's that whilst that sounds a lot, it wasn't compared to the previous model, which had 70 plus. So yes, simplification of contracts. I think it's an aspiration that we all need to get to. And one of the things that I do think that digitalization will transform is the need to write down every single process constraint, because digitalization will contain those constraints within models and within processes and within systems, such that they don't then contain the human controlling mechanism. So yeah, I'm entirely in favour of reflecting the construction playbook ambition into a simplified contract form.
Fantastic. So we're running out of time here, and we've got so many great questions, but I'm just going to go to one more, which is about procurement. And we've had a good question here from Elise Taylor and also from Richard Ward-James. Is the problem actually not the contract, but the procurement approaches that we're using? And is it the procurement that needs to change? So we've only really got a minute or so left. So I'll perhaps come to each of you just for a very snappy answer on that. Martin, as we're talking to you, do you want to start?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Brilliantly snappy. Dev, what's your thoughts?
Yes, actually, I would agree with Martin.
Keith?
Yeah, but we need to go further than that. We need to go back in time to make sure we're setting out the requirements and the value drivers and understanding those and reflecting that in the procurement. But currently, we procure the same thing in many different ways with different forms of contract. It's very difficult for industry to respond strategically to that market.
Great. And Richard?
Yeah, I think they're almost interchangeable in this debate. Contract and procurement, the words contract and procurement, we could have set the debate up like that. Actually, we would have got many of almost all the same points. Actually, so yeah, I do think that's a good point. They're interchangeable.
Brilliant. Well, I'm afraid we haven't got time for a lot of the rest of the comments, but there's some really good ones in the chat. But actually, we've heard from our experts, and it is now time to hear from you. So we're going to hand over in a minute to Richard to sum up the whole of this debate. But before we do that, would really like you to answer this question on the screen. And we've had a lot of banter before the event about which side was going to be most persuasive in their argument. So this is a test of how persuasive that they have been. What's your thoughts? Is construction digital transformation dependent on the introduction of contracting models? Is it a solid yes? Is it no? Or are you still not sure? Let's vote now, and we'll give you 30 seconds just to put your answers in. Great. I'm just going to say that the host and the panelists can't vote on this, so we're not skewing the scores in any way.
I tried.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Andy, do you want to come in here? Have we got our results? Brilliant. So fascinating result there. 76 people, 58% have said yes, it's absolutely dependent on new contracting models. 35% saying no, 6% still not sure. So I'll hand over now to Richard to sum up the debate.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody. And I think first thing I'd like to say, just thanks to Keith and Martin, who are obviously very worthy opponents in any debate, but certainly in that one, just really lucky to have you with us today. And before the debate, I do have a lot of thoughts that sit on your side of the fence. Actually, that we as an industry we shouldn't be sort of sitting here helpless and saying that actually it's just all about the contracts and it's not our fault. So I do actually agree with many of those points, but I also have seen many instances where the contracts are blocking us and if anything else, reducing our pace is probably probably the point, but I thought you made a ton of really great points overall. And of course, really lucky to have Dev on my side, because he's leading a cutting edge digital company in the construction place, nPlan. If you haven't read about nPlan, then you should. And we do some work at Atkins with them and getting some great results. Look, and I thought it was a really healthy debate, and I like the car analogy at the start, and I certainly liked in the chat there was an extension of that into the self-driving cars, and I think that's where we would aspire to get to, wouldn't we, with some of the contractual points, that they start to self-drive the right results and the right behaviours, which was a point that was brought up a lot, and I do agree with that as well. Unless as an industry we can transform how we work and our attitudes and behaviours, then it probably will be quite hard to find any contracting model that will fix all the problems. I do certainly agree with that, and some great points from Martin around where Highways England are moving, and I do see that they are strong leaders in this space, are moving to allow value capture, and I did major on that at the start. And it's not just because I want to make higher margins in my business. It's because I do believe that allowing innovators and technology companies to capture the margin and value they create, not capture the margin, capture the value they create, will allow us to continue investing in more R&D and will accelerate the transformation of the sector. So I do really believe that is a super important point. But look, I think that's about everything that I wanted to say in the wrap up. But thank you to the panel, and thank you, Lisa, for being such an excellent chair of a difficult group, and Andy and member of my team, Richard Seston, who put an awful lot of work into, who came up with the idea for a debate like this, and hopefully everybody found it a little bit different to the typical sort of panel that we might run. And if you like that sort of format, then let us know. And I think there's been so many great questions. It probably speaks for itself, and we might even have to have a follow-up, a round 2. But thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Andy.
Thanks very much, Richard, and thank you, the audience. What a fantastic debate that was. We were inundated with questions, just had too many of them. And I just got to read this out that was in the chat from Peter McDermott from the University of Salford. He said, "The future's bright. Lawyers, technologists, engineers, builders in 2021 debating like sociologists and social scientists." I mean, what a fantastic melange of views. And a really, really good debate. I'm really grateful to everyone who took part in that. God knows how we're going to basically sum all that up. My colleague in the background, his head's just exploded in terms of trying to get all the points across, but there will be a report online. It'll probably be Monday now, actually, because I think he's got to take his head out of the oven. He's basically just completely zapped with all the questions. But thanks very much indeed. And thanks as well to our absolutely fantastic panel, to Richard Robinson, to Dev Amratia, to Martin Perks, to Keith Waller. I'm about to do some driving this afternoon. I'll never think of it in the same way again, which brings me on to a shameless plug for next week's webinar, which is on the future of transport, aptly enough, 11 o'clock on Friday. So do sign up for that if you haven't already. And obviously as well, thank you very, very much to our brilliant chair, to Lisa Kelvey from KPMG, for keeping things moving along. That's it from us. It might be a bit wet at the moment where you are. Hopefully the sun will come out the weekend and you all have a restful weekend. So thank you very much again from this special debate organised in association with Atkins. It's me, Andy Walker, saying tatty bye, and we'll see you again. And goodbye from the panellists, who are all going to wave in the time-honoured way. Thanks very much.
Well,
thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.